Hey everyone, it's Selwen here. Let's talk about the Arms Warrior. Now, unlike Fury, which I believe, and personally I think, is in a pretty good state, right? I think that Fury in Shadowlands just feels like an improvement over the BFA version. You have a lot of amazing talents, a lot of cool things going for it that fits the fantasy perfectly. Now, as for Arms, I think it still needs some work. There's a couple of weird things going for it at the time that I think isn't really warranted. There's a couple of weird changes that can be a little bit subjective, and in fact, a lot of the changes that we're going to talk about will fall down to, yeah, I like this, but at the same time, I do not like this, right? But it's still alpha, so, it's still really early. There's a lot of time to fix all those things and maybe improve them and maybe add something cool to Arms. It's still very, very early. So without any further ado, let's just take a quick look on our unpruned abilities, what base abilities are new on Arms, and much like, Fury, we're getting a lot of the protection-based abilities, which is simply fantastic. Like shield, spell reflection, shield block, shield slam, ignore pain. All of these are really great to have back, especially ignore pain and shield reflection. I don't know why I have so much trouble saying that. Yeah, shield reflection, they're awesome. Like shield reflection, for an example, doesn't require rage, doesn't require your shield, right? You can just use it. Awesome ignore pain when you are in a pinch, for survivability. So you have that on top of die by the sword. You're also getting shattering throw, which is simply fantastic. The damage it deals to shields, so juicy. And plus removing immunities, which is, well, needless to say, awesome. We also getting a piercing howl, piercing howl, which came over from Fury, which is also great. It does have a cooldown, but again, it still have hamstring that you can spam. So overall, the unpruned abilities pretty great. However, what's not so great, at least subjectively, I mean, it is good, but at the same time, in a different point of view, it's not so good. It's our mastery, okay? So Deep Wounds is now changed, is no longer a dot, okay? It's no longer this dot that you keep up, and it's cumulative in damage, right? So now it's still a dot, but it's a very weak dot, but it's increasing the damage that you do to an enemy. Now, on one side, I do like this because it's fitting the fantasy of an Arms Warrior. For me, an Arms Warrior is about hitting hard, slow, but hard, with your mortal strikes, with your executes, right? Just big hits, contrary to Fury, which is all very fast-paced and smaller, but a lot more hits, right? So our mastery does fit in with that fantasy. You're gonna hit harder all the time, and then you can combine this with, of course, Colossus Smash for even bigger hits. So that's what I like about the mastery. However, you do losing that somewhat skill cap based ability that was the old Deep Wounds. Because yes, Deep Wounds was just a bleed that was applied naturally with your mortal strikes, but its duration actually made it something that was quote-unquote hard to keep up. There was actually a difference between good Arms Warriors and bad Arms Warriors, depending how well they were able to keep up the dot, right? So you do losing a little bit of a skill cap by having Deep Wounds revamped, but still pretty cool as it fits the fantasy of an Arms Warrior. So that covers our base stuff, so let's go over to our talents. Now our talents haven't gotten many changes as well. For the most part, they're the same. Covenant abilities will influence this a little bit, but we'll go over those in a minute. What has changed is our AoE tier. Now, Blizzard still hasn't gotten around to remove the GCD of Sweeping Strikes, which is just a travesty. So their solution was to, well, make Cleave replace Sweeping Strikes so you don't have as many global cooldowns. Now, I don't really agree with this decision. I think Cleave and Sweeping Strikes both have their places. They might revert this, hopefully. I think the philosophy, the design idea of instead of removing the GCD, you merge abilities. That was kind of hinted when they talked in an interview with Preach about mages, that maybe the solution was not to remove GCD, instead was to maybe remove abilities, or, well, in this case, merge them. I don't really agree with that. I think taking Cleave now feels really weird, not having Sweeping Strikes, but because Sweeping Strikes, it's an awesome ability, right? You can do some pretty cool things with it, and you can also do some pretty cool things with Cleave. So I think this is a bad decision overall. Now, Cleave, contrary to the first iteration that ARMS had, no longer is this ability that you gain after using a Whirlwind, so that interaction, that synergy is gone, which is a little bit sad. So it's back to being the normal Cleave that you have currently. It does consume an overpower effect, an overpower buff, which is good, but at the same time rather, is bad, because imagine you are in a situation where you have ads, but you also have a priority target. You have Cleave talented, so you're going to be using Cleave, but you're also going to be using Mortal Strikes on your primary target, obviously. And there's a big chance that Cleave is going to munch, is going to eat the overpower buff that otherwise you would want for the Mortal Strike to deal more damage to the priority target. Okay, so in those situations, it can be a little bit weird, a little bit awkward, but besides that, I think it's cool because you deal more damage, but it does create awkward situations as well. So Cleave right now, I don't think... I mean, it's fine, but it does have a couple of issues, and the fact that it replaces Sweeping Strikes, I think, is just a bad decision overall. Then besides that, you do get the new collateral damage. So this is basically the Sweeping Strikes build, if you will. Basically, the more targets you hit with Sweeping Strikes, you're going to get a bigger Whirlwind after it. Just one bigger Whirlwind. I don't think this is super exciting as well. I think this could be potentially better if, instead of just getting one big Whirlwind, which is not a big deal, right? You cannot always time that correctly, even. I think it would be better to, instead of just getting this really big Whirlwind, to reduce the percentage of the damage increase, and maybe after the Sweeping Strikes, you get, like, say, 10 seconds of bigger, more harder hits of Whirlwind. That could potentially be a little bit more interesting. It could create a bigger synergy with Fervor of Battle. Okay, so I think that could potentially make this talent a little bit more interesting than currently is. So yeah, those are the two main talents that changed that I don't really agree with. I think the previous versions were a little bit better, but again, as I said, this is alpha, and things might change, and, well, that's my opinion on them. On this tier, Deadly Calm also changed a little bit. It's now increasing your maximum rage by 30, which is a little bit interesting, because this can mean more rage for you to say, pull in rage for executes, right? So there's potentially some cool stuff there, but at the same time, I think Avatar and Invert Gill are simply more fun talents, more satisfying talents to take than Deadly Calm. I was never a fan of Deadly Calm. On the last tier here, we get Dreadnought, which is just got the overpower trait baked into it, which, it's okay. Then you get Ravager. Now, Ravager, at the beginning of actually the alpha, was actually separate from Bladestorm, so you could do some pretty cool stuff, some pretty crazy stuff. Now they revert that decision, which I think is understandable, was a little bit crazy, but they also changed how Ravager now works. So if I can probably show it, or maybe I'll just put some footage in the background, that will be better. Ravager now, cosmetic-wise, actually got a cool change, because you do see your weapon while you throw Ravager, which I think is pretty cool. But Ravager now, instead of just throwing and staying in place, it will actually chase targets. Now, it's not a target of your choosing, which is a little bit weird. It just chases random targets. Maybe it chases the target that you have targeted, but it's not always that clear to what target is actually following. The issue with that, and I do get that change, first of all, I do get because Ravager always had that issue where you could throw a Ravager and then the tank moves away, and the mobs move away from the Ravager, and you just lose a tremendous amount of DPS, and it feels awful. So this idea, this change, is to combat that. The issue with that is that it moves way too slow. So this is maybe something that they could tweak to maybe move it faster, because at this point, the way it's moving right now is practically pointless. It's not combating that issue at all, because it just moves it just moves way too slow. The other issue is that, again, just like our mastery, where you kind of have two sides of the argument, the old Ravager could potentially lead you to do some pretty cool things by planning around and using a Ravager to hit ads, for an example, that's gonna appear in a certain place, right? So there was a couple of cool things that experienced arms warriors could do with a well-placed Ravager, and this change makes it impossible. So as it stands, it's not really working in either way, but if they want to stick with the idea of following targets, they need to make it go faster. If not, just please go back to the old Ravager, because it will be better. All right, so basically that's our talents, that's our changes. A lot of goods and bads. I get the idea, I get some of the changes, but they're not working super well, so hopefully they will change some of these things up. So with that said, let's go over our Covenant abilities. Now, our Covenant abilities, the one I actually want to start with is Condemn. Now, Condemn is super cool for arms because it's essentially replacing your Execute for a super cool and more powerful ability, essentially. So basically, your Execute is going to turn to a Pseudo Reaping Flames. You're going to be able to use on targets above 80% of HP and below 20% as a normal Execute, and you also get a little debuff to prevent some damage taken to you that you take. So this for arms is simply fantastic, right? Because your Execute is just gonna hit super hard. But one thing that you need to keep in mind, though, is that our new deep wounds, while our Execute doesn't apply our new deep wounds. So you do have to taking that in account, that you do gonna need to keep that up quite regularly with Mortal Strikes. So it's just a little side note there, that Executes no longer apply, at least for now, no longer apply deep wounds. Now, Condemn is very cool because arms has a lot of focus on Executes. So this ability is just purely screaming arms to me. Plus, since it's technically an Execute ability, if you pick Execute-based talents, like Sudden Death, like Massacre, that Covenant ability will be directly affected by it to become even more powerful. So that's why I really like Condemn to Arms Warriors. It's really fucking fun, even though it's hella bugged right now on the alpha. So yeah. Then you have the other ones like Spear of Bastion from the Kyrian one, and the Night Fae, Ancient Aftershock. And I actually mixed these two because they're essentially providing the same things, which is more AoE damage. We have Spear of Bastion, which is really awesome, where you throw a spear, you get this area of effect damage, it feathers enemies so they don't run away, kind of like a grip. And then you get Ancient Aftershock, which is essentially a shockwave. It deals damage in a cone, and it stuns enemies. I think both of these are really fun to use in AoE situations. However, I think Ancient Aftershock will probably be really fun and useful on dungeons, right, because of the sun. So yeah, those two are pretty cool for AoE, very fun to use. And then you have Conqueror's Banner, which, just like in Fury, it's weird. I don't think it's working all that well. Essentially, you get this banner. Banners are back in a way, and you gain a movement speed, and as you kill enemies or you use Mortal Strikes, you're gonna stack up this buff, where you then can place the banner to provide a pseudo bloodlust, increasing attack speed and increasing health to 5 allies. Right now, I think this ability could use a couple of tweaks. It can also create a weird situation where certain warriors might feel pressured to take this ability in order to buff other warriors and other melees, kind of be banner bitches, essentially. That could potentially happen. Another issue with the banner, which actually someone pointed that out and actually completely passed by me, is the fact that right now there isn't an exhaust ability an exhaust debuff rather on the banner, so potentially could lead to just warriors stacking the banner up, so you essentially keep up this buff for a very long periods of time, even though that it kind of sucks that you cannot use on openers because the buff does take a very long time to stack up if you don't actually get kills, but that could potentially be a problem because 50% attack speed might not be a big deal for a short period of time, but if you can keep that up for a very long periods of time, could potentially be a little bit OP. But again, it's alpha. We shall see what happens. I think in general, this ability, for me, it's cool. I actually, personally, I really like it, but I think it's bound to create a lot of issues. And simply on itself, it doesn't feel as interesting or as cool as, as a Spear of Bastion, as Ancient Aftershock, or as Condemned. It doesn't feel as powerful, nor as useful in a general sense as a, as a DPS spec. So yeah, so in general, I think ARMS, it's obviously not done. ARMS, they're still figuring some stuff out. There's potential to be a good spec, and there's the thing, like, at its core, it's still playing in the same way as the current BFA version. It's still hitting hard. It's still all about those slow but big hits, right? Especially with our new mastery, you still have that embedded on our spec, which is great. That's what the fantasy of ARMS is. But obviously, there's a couple of things that need to be tuned, to some knobs that need to be turned, like the cleave, like the sweeping strikes, maybe the GCDs, that's still an issue. And I think merging abilities is not the solution to the GCD problem. Well, so overall, it's fine, just could use some extra work. Alright guys, that does it for me, and as always, thank you for watching, and I'll see you all next time.